I'm Charlotte Walker, 35, a creative director in New York City. I used to believe that family was everything, that no matter how successful or independent I became, I would always owe them my unwavering support. For years, I lived by that belief, funneling thousands of dollars from my own modest salary into my parents' Bill's emergency home repairs and every last-minute expense that they threw my way. My brother Lucas, 3 years younger, never seemed to worry about money the way I did. He's always had a knack for finding ways to make his financial failures someone else's problem. It was never a question for me. I paid because I loved them, because they were family, and because that's what good daughters are supposed to do. I still remember the first time I covered one of Lucas's emergencies when I was 24, a minor car accident that left him with a wrecked bumper and a mountain of unpaid tickets. My mom said he was just going through a tough patch, and my dad said I was the only one who could help. So I wrote the check. And then another and another, each time telling myself it was only temporary. But the emergencies never stopped. I moved to New York with dreams of building a life on my own terms, yet every month, like clockwork, there was a new request from home. Lucas's tuition, Dad's new heart medication, Mom's dental work, a leaking roof. I gave and gave until I stopped keeping track. They never thanked me, not really. They just expected it. I thought that's what family meant, sacrificing without question. Until one rainy Tuesday night in April, as I sifted through paperwork with my financial advisor, I stumbled across something that cracked that belief wide open. It was a file I'd never noticed before in our shared family cloud drive, innocuously titled Final Will and Testament Updated only a few months ago. My stomach tightened in that instant, a cold, creeping dread that told me this was more than I was ready to face. But I opened it anyway, telling myself it was probably just routine paperwork, just another sign of my parents planning for the future. Little did I know that within those legal lines lay a betrayal that would turn everything I'd believed about family upside down. The document didn't mention me once, not as a beneficiary, not even as a footnote. Every last dollar, every last family possession, every last scrap of what I thought we shared, it was all left to Lucas. My name, my contributions. My years of devotion vanished in black and white ink. As I stared at those words, my heart thundered in my ears, a roar that drowned out every excuse I'd ever made for them. And yet, even in that moment, I told myself there had to be some explanation. Some reason I'd been erased so easily, so completely. I couldn't know then how far the betrayal would stretch, or how much it would take for me to finally reclaim my own story. I closed my laptop slowly, almost afraid that if I moved too quickly, I'd shatter the fragile calm I'd built around myself. My mind raced with the words I'd read, the damning confirmation that I was nothing more than a footnote in my family's life, despite everything I'd done. The betrayal stung like acid in my veins, turning every memory of late-night calls for help, every loan I'd offered, every holiday dinner I'd paid for, into sharp shards of resentment. I couldn't help but think back to the endless sacrifices I'd made, like the time I canceled my dream trip to Japan because Mom needed a dental implant that Medicare didn't cover, or when Dad's car needed repairs and Lucas was too busy working on his next big idea to lift a finger, so I paid for that too, without even a thank you. They had taken my support for granted, twisted my love into obligation, and then had the gall to erase me from their future altogether. In the days that followed, my mind kept circling back to that one line in the will, "We have provided sufficiently for our daughter throughout her successful life and career." It felt like a slap in the face, a cold dismissal of everything I'd given them. I replayed the conversations where I'd asked for so little in return, a nod of gratitude, a single word of thanks, and how they'd brushed me aside. And Lucas, the golden boy who had never had to fight for anything because he always had me to bail him out. My brother, who somehow managed to keep failing upward while I kept working harder, longer, better, to make up for his endless potential. His smug grin at family dinners, the way he talked about his next big project while I watched my bank account drain to support him and our parents. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that will. Every time my phone buzzed with another family text, I felt the sting of betrayal all over again. My partner Nathan noticed before I even had the words to explain. "They're using you," he said one night as I sat staring at the spreadsheet of every dollar I'd sent home. "They've been using you for years, Charlotte, and they're not going to stop unless you make them." His words rattled me because deep down, I knew he was right. The final straw came the following Sunday. My parents had invited me for dinner, roast beef, my mother's favorite. I walked in with a polite smile, holding a bottle of wine I'd bought on the way over, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. Lucas was already there, lounging on the couch, like he owned the place, laptop open, telling Dad about some new app he was about to launch, if only he could secure $50,000 in funding. I watched them fawn over him, nodding along like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs, and it was all I could do not to scream. I'd curated last month the promotion I'd been offered. All that mattered was that I was still there to keep paying for their lives, while mine stayed stuck in neutral. I left early that night, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth would crack. Driving back to my apartment, I decided I was done waiting for them to see me. Done, hoping they'd finally realize I was more than just a bank account they could raid whenever they wanted. I was finished being the backup plan for a family that never planned on including me. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt like your love was being taken for granted, like your sacrifices didn't matter, I want you to know you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me if you've faced something like this. Hit that subscribe button so we can keep sharing these stories and remind each other that our worth isn't defined by who takes advantage of us. It's defined by what we decide to fight for. Driving home that night, I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, my mind a jumble of fury and disbelief. How had I let it get this far? How had I become the family ATM, expected to foot every bill without a word of complaint, while my name was quietly erased from their future? The betrayal was no longer something I could swallow down or explain away as family obligations. It was a slap in the face. I couldn't unfeel a wound that burned hotter every time I remembered Lucas's smug face at that dinner table, bragging about his latest business idea, while my parents practically beamed at him like he'd hung the moon. I felt every inch of my apartment when I got home, tiny, modest, cluttered with the boxes I'd never unpacked, because I always thought I'd eventually move to a bigger place. But I couldn't, because every extra dollar went to them. Every dream I'd had traveling to Japan, buying a home of my own, had been pushed back further and further while I funded their lives. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the betrayal looping in my head like a broken record. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I wouldn't just let this go. I wouldn't pretend anymore. It was time for them to see the truth. So I spent the next 3 days pulling together every scrap of evidence, bank statements, wire transfers, checks, receipts, everything that proved just how deep my support had gone. When I looked at the final total, it nearly knocked the wind out of me, $168,000 in 3 years. That's what I'd given to a family who decided I wasn't even worth a mention in their will. Nathan sat with me as I organized everything, his calm presence, a steady anchor in the storm. "You're doing the right thing," he told me, his voice low but sure. "They've taken from you long enough." His certainty gave me the strength to keep going, even when the guilt threatened to drown me. Sunday dinner loomed again, but this time I was ready. I walked into that house with my head held high, laptop in hand, and I didn't let my mother's practiced smile or my father's jovial greeting throw me off. Lucas was there, of course, his feet up on the coffee table, acting like the king of a castle he didn't build. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I didn't care. I had nothing left to lose. We went through the motions, small talk, laughter, that didn't reach my eyes. But when the plates were cleared and the conversation turned to money, as it always did, I didn't wait. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. My parents exchanged nervous glances. Lucas rolled his eyes. "About what?" my dad asked, trying to keep his tone light. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them. "This," I said. "This is everything I've paid for over the past 3 years. Every loan, every repair, every emergency." My mother's mouth fell open, her eyes darting across the spreadsheet that detailed every dollar. My father's face turned red, a flush creeping up his neck. Lucas snorted. Come on, Charlotte. Are you really keeping score like that? It's family. No, I said, my voice calm, cold. It's exploitation. And it stops now. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator, the same one I'd paid to replace last winter when theirs broke down. Then my father finally found his voice. We didn't realize. We thought you were happy to help. My laugh was sharp, humorless. Happy. You think I was happy to put my dreams on hold so you could keep pretending everything was fine. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, but I didn't soften. I love you, I said, my voice breaking a little. But love doesn't mean I have to keep paying for everything while you treat me like I don't even exist in your plans for the future. Lucas tried to cut in, but I cut him off with a glare. Don't, just don't. My father sighed, leaning back in his chair. So what are you saying? He asked quietly. I'm saying it stops. I said, my resolve hardening like steel. No more monthly checks. No more covering your emergencies. I'm done being the safety net. My mother's shoulders slumped, but Lucas's face twisted in anger. You're abandoning them, he spat. No, I said, standing up. I'm saving myself. I gathered my laptop and left my heart pounding, but my back straight. I didn't look back as I closed the door behind me, but I felt the weight of generations of guilt and obligation slip off my shoulders. And as I drove away, I realized for the first time in my life, I was finally free to choose my own future. The day I walked into my parents' house, ready to confront years of silence and injustice, felt like stepping into a battlefield disguised as a family living room. My heart pounded as I set my laptop on the coffee table, fingers trembling slightly as I opened the spreadsheet I had painstakingly compiled. The numbers stared back at them in cold, unyielding rows. $168 over 3 years, every penny I had sent, every emergency I had absorbed alone. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's eyes welled with tears, not from relief or gratitude, but from the shock of being faced with facts they could no longer ignore. My father adjusted his glasses nervously, his usual confident veneer cracking under the weight of truth. Lucas sat frozen, the arrogance that had once filled the room drained away in an instant. I could see it in their faces, the uncomfortable realization that my role in this family had been far more than a dutiful daughter. I wasn't a helper. I had been their financial backbone, their safety net, and they had taken me for granted. We didn't realize it was this much, Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. We thought you were happy to help. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat and said I wasn't happy. I was exhausted, and I was invisible. My voice cracked, but I pushed on, forcing the words out because they had been stuck inside me for too long. Lucas was the first to break the silence, his voice dripping with resentment. Are you really going to keep score? This isn't a business deal, Charlotte. It's family. I stared at him, the same brother who never lifted a finger to contribute, who lived rent-free in the basement while spinning grand plans that never materialized. Family isn't supposed to be a one-way street, I replied firmly. And love isn't an excuse to exploit. Their expressions hardened, as if I had insulted them personally, but I refused to back down. My father cleared his throat and tried to regain control of the conversation, but it was too late. I had already taken the first step to shatter the facade they had built for years. I told them about every sacrifice, the canceled vacations, the delayed promotions, the nights I worked overtime to cover their bills. I reminded them that while Lucas was given endless chances and endless patience, I was expected to silently shoulder the burden. I've been carrying you all, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. But I'm done being the family's bank without acknowledgement or respect. Mom's eyes filled with tears again, this time tinged with regret. We never meant to hurt you, she said softly, reaching out as if to bridge the growing chasm between us. But years of neglect and unspoken grievances cannot be erased with a single apology. I stepped back, gently shaking my head. It's not just about the money. It's about being seen, being valued beyond what I provide. You chose to leave me out of the will, and that decision speaks louder than any words. My father sighed heavily, the weight of his mistakes finally settling on his shoulders. We've been protecting Lucas because of his struggles, he admitted quietly. But that doesn't excuse ignoring you. The revelation cut through the tension, exposing the hidden cracks in our family. They confessed to shielding Lucas from accountability because of his issues, but in doing so, they had enabled him and dismissed my unwavering support. I listened, my anger tempered by the painful understanding that their intentions, while misguided, were rooted in fear and love. Still, fear could not justify the years of disrespect I had endured. Lucas, who had remained silent for much of the confrontation, suddenly erupted in frustration. You don't understand what it's like. I needed help, and you're throwing it back in my face. His voice was raw, desperate. That inheritance is all I've got to fix my life. I met his gaze without flinching. That inheritance depends on death. That's not a plan, Lucas. It's waiting for tragedy. The room fell silent once more, the harsh reality of our fractured family hanging in the air. In that moment, I laid down my final demand: accountability and change. I told them that moving forward, the gravity of the moment. I left that house not as the broken, exhausted daughter who had arrived, but as someone reclaiming her power and demanding the respect she deserved. The path ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and setbacks, but for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. Hope that love could coexist with boundaries, and that healing might be possible if we all committed to change. That night, the air was thick with tension. As I sat at my kitchen table, the soft glow of my laptop screen illuminating the truth I was about to unleash. After years of quietly shouldering my family's financial burdens, I was ready to fight back, not with anger alone, but with proof. Lucas had crossed every line, and it was time the world knew. The idea started as a whisper in my mind, then grew into a roar. I would no longer be the family's scapegoat or secret bank. I hired a lawyer to dig into the messy details of the debts Lucas had hidden, the forged signatures, the lies spun to cover his reckless behavior. When the evidence was undeniable, I filed a lawsuit against him for fraud and forgery, a move that shocked everyone, especially my parents. The betrayal cut deeper than any missing inheritance. It was the realization that the very brother I had supported had been using me as a pawn in his games. The day the lawyer sent the official papers to Lucas was both exhilarating and terrifying. I knew this fight would burn bridges and break family ties, but I also knew it was necessary. For too long, I'd allowed my generosity to be weaponized against me. My parents called repeatedly, their voices dripping with disappointment and disbelief, accusing me of tearing the family apart. But I stood firm, reminding them that silence and enabling had allowed this to happen. Lucas's carefully constructed facade crumbled as the truth came to light. He could no longer hide behind empty promises or fake business ventures. The revelation ignited a firestorm of conversations and confrontations no one was prepared for. I remember the first time I confronted Lucas after the lawsuit was filed. His smug confidence was gone, replaced by desperation and anger. "You don't get to play judge and jury," he spat. "You're ruining everything." I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I'm saving myself from you from this toxic cycle. It's not about revenge, it's about justice." That moment crystallized everything I had endured: the sleepless nights, the canceled dreams, the invisible sacrifices. I realized my fight was not just for money, but for my dignity and peace of mind. My actions forced my parents to face uncomfortable truths they had long ignored. They began attending financial counseling, confronting their own enabling behaviors, and the deep favoritism they had shown Lucas. For the first time, we had open and honest conversations about money addiction and responsibility. It wasn't easy. There were tears, arguments, and moments when it felt like everything might collapse. But slowly, a new foundation was laid, one built on accountability rather than excuses. Lucas started attending support groups for his gambling addiction and took the first shaky steps toward rebuilding his life with honesty. Though his path to redemption was long and uncertain, the family's willingness to acknowledge and address their issues was a monumental shift. Meanwhile, I reclaimed my life. The weight of unpaid debts and unacknowledged sacrifices lifted as I redirected my energy toward my own future. I bought my own condo, finally giving myself the stability and comfort I had delayed for so long. I invested in my career and my relationship with Nathan, who had stood by me unwaveringly. This chapter was about more than financial freedom. It was about rediscovering self-worth and setting boundaries that no one would dare cross again. Though the scars from betrayal still lingered, I no longer carried them as chains, but as reminders of strength. I learned that family doesn't mean unconditional sacrifice, it means mutual respect and honesty. This fight was painful, but it paved the way for healing and hope. The road ahead remains unpredictable, but for the first time, I walk it with purpose and peace. The day my mother handed me that letter at the cafe felt like the culmination of years of silent suffering and unspoken grievances. She looked tired, not just physically, but in a way that seeped from her very soul. Gone were the designer clothes and the carefully crafted smiles. Instead, she wore simplicity, humility, and for the first time, honesty. "Charlotte," she said, stirring her coffee, "slowly, we've been going through counseling. It's been hard, but it's making us see things clearly." As I listened, her words washed over me like a long overdue apology, filled not just with regret, but with a promise of change. My father joined us for lunch the next weekend, equally subdued, admitting their blindness to the weight I'd carried and their own mistakes in enabling Lucas. For the first time, they faced the reality that love without respect is a hollow thing, and their favoritism had sown deep wounds. Yet I knew that words alone could not erase years of betrayal. The process of rebuilding began slowly. My parents committed to transparency, sharing their finances openly, and working with counselors to set boundaries and budgets that reflected their true means. Lucas, too, started to confront his demons, attending Gamblers Anonymous and accepting responsibility for the mess he'd created. It wasn't a perfect transformation. There were setbacks moments when old habits threatened to resurface and the past loomed heavy. But amidst it all, the foundation of honesty and accountability started to take root. I began to believe cautiously that our fractured family might heal not through denial, but through confronting the uncomfortable truths we had long avoided. Meanwhile, my own journey toward healing deepened. Therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez helped me untangle the complex knots of guilt, resentment, and love that had bound me for so long. I learned the crucial difference between enabling and supporting, between sacrificing myself and standing firm with compassion. I found strength in setting clear boundaries, knowing that self-care was not selfish, but necessary. The financial freedom I reclaimed was more than numbers in a bank account. It was freedom to live authentically and love without losing myself. I poured energy into my career, my relationship with Nathan, and most importantly, into rebuilding my sense of self-worth. The holidays that year arrived with a quiet apprehension. For the first time, I hosted Thanksgiving at my new condo, establishing rules to ensure this gathering would be different. Everyone brought a dish. Gifts were modest and thoughtful, and conversations about money were off limits. The atmosphere was surprisingly warm, the laughter genuine, free from the undercurrent of tension that had always defined our family celebrations. Watching my parents and Lucas participate without the usual financial drama was a balm to my weary soul. It reminded me that true connection thrives not on transactions or expectations, but on respect and presence. I know the road ahead will never be without challenges. Old patterns sometimes resurface, especially when stress and crisis hit. But now I have the tools and the resolve to steer us back on course, to say no when needed, and to expect honesty in return. The spreadsheet I once used to prove my worth sits untouched, a reminder of battles fought and lessons learned, but no longer the centerpiece of my life. That rainy night when I discovered the will and felt my world tilt is a moment I won't forget, but it no longer defines me. Family, I've come to understand, is a choice as much as a bond. It's choosing mutual care over obligation, respect over exploitation, love over silence. I still love my family deeply, but I love myself more. I share this story not because I am proud of the pain, but because I hope it offers strength to anyone trapped in similar cycles. You deserve relationships that honor your worth, not ones that drain you. You deserve boundaries that protect your peace. And you deserve the freedom to rewrite your story on your own terms. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against those you love? How did you find the strength to set boundaries? Share your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage, healing, and self-discovery. Together, we can break the silence and build the respect we all deserve. 3 months had passed since I set those hard boundaries with my family. The silence that followed was deafening at first, a void where daily calls, requests, and manipulative texts used to flood my phone. Instead of relief, I felt a strange mix of liberation and loneliness. The absence of their demands was a breath of fresh air, yet the quiet pressed down with the weight of unresolved pain. Then, out of nowhere, an envelope arrived, its familiar handwriting both comforting and haunting. Inside was a letter from my parents, not a demand, not a plea, but a genuine apology. They admitted how deeply they had taken my generosity for granted and shared how financial counseling had opened their eyes to the damage their favoritism and secrecy caused. They promised to rebuild trust, starting with transparency and equal respect for me and Lucas. Meeting my mother at a neutral cafe felt like meeting a stranger. She wasn't the woman who had once relied on my support unquestioningly, but someone humbled, stripped of pretense. Her honesty about their past mistakes, the unequal treatment of me and Lucas, the excuses made for his failures, felt like the first real step toward healing. My father's tearful admission that he'd shifted his pride onto me, expecting me to carry the family's burden, cut through years of bitterness. They were finally seeing what I'd long hoped they would. But healing is never linear. Lucas's road was the hardest. His initial anger at being confronted with his gambling addiction slowly softened as he sought help attending meetings and facing his demons for the first time. Though the bitterness lingered, I saw glimmers of accountability in him, a reluctant but real desire to change. For my part, therapy helped me untangle the web of guilt and resentment, teaching me that love without respect is toxic, and that boundaries are acts of self-love, not betrayal. This Thanksgiving, I hosted our first holiday free of financial tension or unspoken grudges. My parents and Lucas showed up not empty-handed, but with modest contributions, and for once our conversations felt genuine and light. The house wasn't lavish, but the laughter was real. I realized family is not about blind sacrifice, it's about mutual respect, honesty, and choice. I share this story for anyone who's ever felt exploited by those they love. Setting boundaries is painful but necessary. It's the first step toward reclaiming your worth and creating relationships rooted in respect, not obligation. Have you faced similar struggles? Share your story below and subscribe for more real talks about family healing and self-empowerment. Your voice matters. So,